Okay, so I thought I'd open up the conversation with some of the things I've discovered about crashes, some of my opinions, theories, things like that. Um, okay, so for openers, before I even get started, I would like to say that just because a person has a crash doesn't mean that it's necessarily a conflict per se, at least not always in the context that conflicts are used. It's not always necessarily a person who mods their game's fault, um, because I'm not, personally, I'm not a mechanic. I don't work on cars. I know a little bit about them, but I'm not a mechanic. Um, Therefore, if something breaks in my car, I wouldn't expect a mechanic to tell me it's something I've done to go and fix it because I have no idea what it is. That's why I asked them. Okay, so that being said, um, it has a tendency to close the door on a lot of the community. And I get it because you get bombarded with so many requests at one time, and you wind up being more in a defense mode than a problem solving mode. But unfortunately, different books, as a metaphor, different books have many different chapters and many different ways of telling a story. It's not best. I'm not basically saying there's only or there's many different paths to quote quote Rome, let's say, and not that Rome is anything I'm a part of, but um, in order to answer a question, you have to understand the language that's used and why, or at least come to an assumption of why they're using it, but not let that taint your reasoning to help someone out. Because they came to you for a reason, for better or ill. That is why they're there. Okay, so now that being said, let's see if we can do some kind of wayback machine here. Um, so let me take a look at load orders that I've had in the past. This is basically a quick summary of load orders, and it's just basically it's basically you could call it a manifest, but it's a log, and it basically records every game session I've had using a particular load order, whether or not I've crashed during that gaming session. And basically, if Fallout 4 or whatever the game you're playing that you've launched through this application crashes, it will actually record that. And it can record one of two types of crashes. One would be like a system exception crash. It would be like a Windows exception. And then the other would be a buff out exception. So consider a Windows exception like the core, because that's kind of built in to the core of Windows, um, or whatever operating system you're using as a base that you're running the game on top of, or buff out 4, which is kind of it modifies the game engine or hooks the game engine's exception. I'm gonna guess it's gonna be like GOMP from back in Amiga, where it hooks the exception calling routines and then tries to provide more information on what potentially could have caused the crash. So it looks at the registers, and then tries to look up certain references that would be within a memory address range of a particular mod, plugin, or file, and then link it back that way. That would be my initial guess. Okay, so that being said, let's take a look. Let's go back. I'm going to go back all the way to, let's look. We have 37 crashes here. So let's go back and take a look. This is my current up here. This Laura Martin. This is my current character. But we're gonna go all the way back to Tally Reese, kind of like a Mass Effect 3 fallback. Tally was always one of my favorite characters, but we'll talk about that later. All right. So, anyways, let's go take a look at this. So I wanna look at the load order history. So basically, I want to see every gaming session that I had and whether or not during that gaming session there was a crash. So the way you read this is I'm currently in my 10th gaming session, and then when the gaming session ended, it detected there was a crash and then tried to give me, it tried to put some information up here I could look at. So you can see where it was crashing like a machine gun. I mean, this is just literally boom, got to play a couple times. I think there was 8 hours before crash, 2 minutes before crash. There was 3 hours before crash because you add this up equals 3 hours and it was crash. So it gives you the amount of time you had, and it just basically just totals up your sessions before crash, and then when it crashes, it resets it back to 0. So here you have, sorry, my stomach. So here you have 2 hours, 2 minutes. So this is just crashing left and right. 1 hour, 2 hours, and this is really not acceptable for, I mean, this is not like, I'm not going to use the term acceptable. This is not really a fun game to play because you don't know when it's going to happen, why it's going to happen, or how it's going to happen. So you're always expecting it to happen. When it does, you just want to throw up your hands and walk away. But let's look at this. So let's go over to here, and we're going to try to overlay or to insert or inject what I could have possibly done to cause this kind of a mess. And if you take a look at it, okay, so here, I believe the 005, if you look at the two different types of error messages, the formatting is definitely different. This is a system error. This is a Windows error. And basically it means that something tried to access a memory location that it wasn't allowed to access. So to give you a little quick just kind of synopsis on this, part of what Windows tries to do, and I'm not a Windows advocate by any means per se, but what Windows tries to do is it tries to protect. Okay, so basically when you're running a program, it has to load the data into memory. So Windows tries to protect the data from injection attacks and other types of hacks by kind of walling off, if you want to call it that, certain memory locations. And if you're not allowed access to that location, it will return an error and basically say you tried to access memory, or the application tried to access memory that it wasn't allowed to access. And a lot of times it's a 0 reference. So if you map the memory, the system basically allocates, operating system basically allocates chunks of memory in certain memory ranges. And it's given to the operating system, and it's supposed to be protected. Now, we're not going to get into the hacking and all that kind of stuff, but it's supposed to be protected. So for some reason, if a reference, let's say to a mesh or a texture, but let's just say a mesh or something in a material file as an example, or a previs or precombined data, for some reason the data is 0, and it tries to use that as a reference. It's thinking that's a memory location because somehow it got bad data, there's an application error, or the programmers made a mistake, or it's a bug, or for some other reason. The reference should point somewhere to way out in system memory. Instead it points to the location 0. Well, that's a protected area. So when you try to reference that, Windows will pop up and say, you tried to access something that you're not allowed to access. And that's what this 005 is. And a lot of times that happens, what they call a null reference. You'll hear that a lot, a null ref or a null reference. So I load a texture in memory, and it gets loaded in, let's say, into memory 5,632. But for some reason, that variable that has 5,632 gets reset to 0. The texture is still in memory, but the reference gets deleted, or maybe or gets reset to 0, or set to 0, or maybe the texture gets released, freed up, and it gets reset, but I'm still thinking that it's loaded into memory. So when I try to access that, I'm going to say, okay, I need to get access to my texture. Where is it? 5,632. But I don't really check that variable because I'm going to assume it's going to have, if it's in memory and I think it's still loaded, it's going to have that value in it. But instead it has 0. So I grab that value, don't check it, I grab the value, and I'm going after my texture. So I try to reference the texture, and I'm referencing it from memory location 0. That's gonna be this kind of crash. Now, if you look at buffout actually tries to extend that a little bit. And so in this case, let's take a look at it. In this case, you can see it's a loose file stream. Now, this is something they were trying to figure out, and I got a lot of these. Well, let me rephrase that. I didn't get a lot of these, but I did intermittently get them while using SimSettlements 2. Now, I don't think that's necessarily an inherent issue with SimSettlement 2 or any other mod for that example, because I got this error even when not playing, not having SimSettlements 2 loaded at all. Like, it wasn't even in my load order. But I did get it using other mods. So the question is, what were the similarities between those mods? The mods, like let's say the TidyBot mod, what was the similarity between that and SimSettlements 2? Because clearly I'm not using SimSettlements 2 right now. I'm still using Workshop Framework. So so to take a little quick sidestep, if I throw too many things in my load order at once, and all of a sudden I get crashes, the question is, what caused it? Did I crash? Did I cause it because I'm unaware of what the mod does? And there's no way I can be aware of every single thing a mod does without having access to script source and data elements. It's impossible. Okay, for the average user, it's impossible. They don't need to know that. They just know they read a mod page. A mod says, oh, I'm Uber programmer, I'm Uber modder. This mod is the shiz, and all of a sudden they put it in there, they get a crash. Well, your shiz ain't the problem, and then all of a sudden they're like, no, it's somebody else's fault, not mine. I encounter that on Skyrim quite a bit, and but anyway, so we're not going to get into all that. So I did encounter this before. All right, so let's just keep going up and take a look. So you can see where it literally was just one crash right after another, just constantly. All right, so if we kind of take a look at this and see what it could possibly be, you can see it's again the same problem. So this particular load order had a lot of problems with loose file stream. So something in here was causing the problem. I know it's not in the base game, so if it's not, let's say there was no such thing as script extender. It was just the base game code. We would assume that it's a problem in the base game code. So I'm writing a script. The Papyrus is compiling it. It's basically kind of doing interpretive execution, and then all of a sudden I get a crash. So is the problem my coding skills? Is the problem I don't understand the data structures enough to code around it? Is the problem a bug in the VM engine, the Papyrus engine, the virtual memory engine, which runs the code? Or is it a game engine thing I've never came across? That's the problem, is where is it at? So if we don't see this inside the native game code, so script extender is not being used at all. If we don't see it there, then it can't be a problem in the scripting engine, or it can't be a problem in the game code. Now, that's not to say that the game doesn't have the native game doesn't have bugs or problems. But these particular problems seem to surface more, perhaps, if using the script extender. So it's got to be something that's being done through that. And one of the things that's being done through that is a lot of list manipulation. Now, when you go back and you take a look at Bethesda's forums, you find out that one of the programs actually said that being able to mitigate linked lists, given the fact that it's supposed to be multi-threaded, can be an incredibly difficult problem, especially in time-sensitive code like game engines. So mitigating those lists can be an issue. Now, when the game comes out, they may believe they've mitigated the issue properly, but that's only based on the game data that they provide with the game, the official files. So it does not mean a bug is not there. They just simply haven't encountered it yet, or did encounter it, removed what they thought was bringing that bug to light, because during the development time period, they decided they didn't have enough time to actually fix the problem. But again, the problem is when you release the game, you allow people to mod it, and then you allow a modding community to increase your revenue without actually providing more solid game code or updates, then you're asking for problems. So anyways, again, that's a different story there. All right, so we're not going to get off on that one. All right, so now so you can see here back onto this that there's quite a lot of few errors. So a lot of few of the same things. I'm pretty sure if you look at any one of these, they're going to show that these are all probably loose file streams or something else. This one is object cell, so this one's more likely pre-combined or previs, because I don't believe I had previs pre-combined, the previs repair pack, the PRP repair pack. I don't believe I had that in this game, not at this particular point, not at this point, because these games are from newest here to oldest down here. These are my load orders. Okay, so you can see where there's issues, and you can see where I did one of two things. I either installed mods because I ran across them, thought, oh, this will be cool to put in my game. I'm going to start a new playthrough anyways. I don't care if I blow my game save apart. I'm going to start another one, here very shortly, so I'm going to throw this in. So these are either done for that reason, or they were done trying to figure out, like a mod author says, ooh, I trimmed this down, I cleaned this up, I found some bad data in the mod, in, like, let's say your archive, your BA2 files, I found some bad data, I cleaned it up. Or they said, oh, this might fix some crashes. I don't know whether I had these particular crashes were related to that, but I went ahead and put them in anyway. So these could be in for one of two reasons. So when you see them there, you got to keep that in mind. But you can see where I went in, and or if it's an update. I'm sorry, there was a third one. So if I updated them, if a mod updated, I would go ahead and include that. I would add that dynamically in the middle of my playthrough. That may or may not cause problems, because some mods, it will definitely cause a problem. Other mods, it does not. So I don't really spend I do kind of read the mod page. I don't spend a whole lot of time dealing with that. So I throw it in there. Like I see, if it blows my game save apart, I'll just fire off another game save eventually. All right. So let's move up to the next one. So we're going to let's unhighlight that. We're going to highlight this one. Let's move up to the next one. So let's take a look at load order history again, which that did not work. All right, let's try this one more time. Yeah, I have no idea about that. Let's see if it's there we go. I have no idea about that one. It could be a bug in the data, but let's move up to the next one. All right. So you can see here that it doesn't have as many crashes as the ones before it, but it does have some. So let's just kind of let's just eyeball a couple of these real quick and see what it, just kind of see what it could possibly be. Okay, now we're going to start getting, it looks like we're going to get into these 140s and 120s. Now I believe these had to do with data link list, pre-combined, pre-conviz. Oh, God, I can't even talk. Previs, pre-combined data structures, because they're all linked together. Mathematics links all these objects together and creates kind of this virtual object out of virtual objects. All right, so we started to get some of those. Here's a Papyrus desync. Now, I've had some of those occasionally. Let's throw the overlays on and let's hunt that little puppy back down. So where'd he go? He's in here somewhere. Okay, so wherever he happens to be, a desync, where I'm going to throw this in where you basically the VM engine is run, I'm pretty sure it's run on a single processing core thread. And what it does, you can have different scripts running, and scripts are broken down into, you don't really see it, but they're broken down into blocks, data blocks. They call those frames. So a frame has parameters coming into it, and more than likely parameters coming out. Or it dynamically updates global parameters, which again is connected to a script, if I'm not mistaken. So you have frame numbers. And I think there is some kind of indexing on the frames where if it's expecting frame number 3, but it gets frame number 10, it desyncs it. It says, okay, I'm out of sync, so I'm not sure what's going on. There's more than likely there's going to be data corruption. So I'm going to kick the game out and say, yep, we got a desync problem. So that's what that was. But you can see where it says here, I've got heavy pre-combined issues. It's right over in this area. This is just me putting a note in this particular file that says, all right, I'm running around. Things are blinking in and out of existence depending on the angle I look. I've got a black hole. I've got a hole in the wall that turns into some kind of psychedelic void. And I know those are previs issues. So I'll put a note in there. Okay, found previs problem. So as I come across them, I'll make a note of this. Now, in one instance, in trying to run to Crew Manor, it actually would lock up. It literally would lock up. If I got even close to it or looked in that direction where it would have to load previs data, it locked up. And I didn't figure that one out until I added the previs repair pack later, which now, if you look at the load order, previs is actually down. Let me see here. Where is P? Where B is PRP? PRP. Let's do it like this. Okay. No, this way. My bad. Okay. So I do have it down here. So it's more. I had this further up in the load order up in here, but I moved it more down to here. So this came later, not during this particular playthrough here, but it did come later. Okay. So let's keep going here. So I do know that there were visual previs problems. And then I noticed I started getting some of these, I'm going to call them 140s because that's the last three, 140s and 120s. So again, if you take a look at it, I updated mods like Bullet Impact, SUP, I updated that. You know, you can see textures, and I found like the tunnel, I think, was an update. But then I would add other mods that I would think, all right, this might be cool. I throw it in there, and you know, just kind of like let's say unique treasures, and then I think this was I think unique NPCs was an update to clean it up a little bit, trim it up. Okay, so and like I think this right here, this technocracy, I believe that was just for sound effects. So that might have been an addition. I'm not really sure. But you can see that the error started going down. So let's see if we can go up to the next one here. Hopefully this will work. All right, so we go up to the next one, and then let's overlay this back out. And you can see that, again, the errors were a little bit less. However, you can see where I actually got an invalid memory address. So we got problems here somewhere along the way. And if we take a look at Buffout, let's go this way and see. Buffout has some, okay, exception stack overflow. Now, I believe this happened because there was some kind of recurring call, whether it was leveled list or something, and I did do some updates. I did kind of add some stuff. Let's take a look here and see. There was updates to Somber Mountain tunnels. Burst Impact, that was an update. Robco Patcher was an update. I think I added Universal Disassembler. Drone was in there, which, like I say, is a cool mod, but for some reason when synths are supposed to spawn them as enemies to the player, but every time a synth spawns them, it actually wipes out the synth patrol, which is funny. Let's see. I think I did put the patch in here. This Universal Fallout 4, unofficial Fallout 4 patch, and there's some PRP data. So that could have caused the error that I had where, let's see here, where it caused the buffer overflow. But again, look, see, you see the loose file stream again. So it's still there. I haven't really made any major changes yet. You know, like what I'm, you know, let me rephrase that. I haven't made changes that reduced that. Well, I have, but it didn't totally eliminate it. So the problem is still there. So again, I've added mods, updated mods. So the question would be what caused it, other than just saying, well, dude, you did it. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's go up to the next one. So you can see the crashes are starting to go down. But you can also look at the number of times I played, because they're proportional to the number of times you play the game. So we're starting to go down here, but let's take a look and see what I can find. All right, so if you look, we do have some crashes. These are kernel-based, but notice I put little notes in here to make it easier to see. You can see where that was the UI crash. That was my fault. I put the wrong Swift file in. But if you take a look, you got 120s. Let's see. That's again, see, there's pre-combined geometry popped up. Virtual machine, there's a desync. That was a desync crash. So you can see a lot of these 120s. Most of these are 120, 120, 120, 140, 120, which I believe was pre-combined. It's related to the lists. And then I didn't really put anything down here because I was actually going to start another game anyways. Because once you get like a whole lot of problems, you don't even worry about it anymore. Okay, let's see. Okay, so see, we're here again, loose file stream. So if that is not a problem in the base game, it's got to be something that is being added to the game. And if it's not the data that the base game is interpreting, then it must be something coming from a plugin that's being hooked in somehow, some way. Because it does happen outside of Fallout Script Extender and plugins do happen outside of game logic, and that's okay. It's not necessarily inherently that particular dynamic link library or its plugins fault, but it could be an inadvertent cause of the issue. So it's not a finger pointing thing. It's all about solving the problem. All right. So, and if I caused the problem, we need to solve it. If someone else caused a problem, we need to solve it. And then it'll be done. All right, so we go back. So we're going to move up the line here. We've got 9 crashes out of 53. So if you multiply that by 4, that would be what about, see what, 9 times 4 is 36, and that would put you up in the 200 range. So that's actually a little bit higher statistics than this, even though it has the, you can see the stability is lower. You can see where the stability gets lower. So that might be due to, encountering particular problems or the fact that I just didn't play it as much, because I only played it 53 times. But you can see where I was traveling to Sanctuary, and you can see it's a 20 or a 120. You see fast travel crash. Well, I was fast traveling to Red Rocket. So that meant that when I fast traveled there, it was in the process of loading the cell. But here's the thing, whenever you go to fast travel or to unload a cell, it's going to unload, I believe it unloads the data first and then reloads whatever data. So it unloads the data it unloads the data that it thinks it doesn't need, and then it loads data back that it doesn't have now loaded into memory that the new cell requires. And that, I think, is part of the problem, because it's the bug where you step on a landmine and then you die, your character dies, you load back into the game without exiting out of game. You don't exit out, you reload your game save, and you find out the mine is not there because the game engine decided that it's not going to free up from memory what the prior game was to try to save loading times. It was a bad choice in sacrificing integrity for a time period or a time frame. That was a bad choice. They should have cleared everything out, and then it should have loaded just like it did if you started a new game. Now, if you exit out of your game and then go back into your game, the landmine will be there because it freed everything up from memory and it has to load it all back from scratch. So I noticed these crash almost immediately. It's not where you have a loading icon at the bottom where it's loading the game. Now, some were, but the majority were not. So you'll see this loading icon blinking on and off, and then all of a sudden it crashes. Well, it crashed while it was trying to load and process data. These happen almost immediately. You fast travel, in less than a second, bam. So that's got to tell me that it's freed something up, and then somehow it thinks it still needs it. Or there's a plugin running before the cell is fully loaded. So Bethesda might say, okay, we know if we do things like, for example, we want to get everything loaded in the cell, and then we're going to show you what, we're gonna render the frame. You're gonna see it on the screen. Well, we want to give the opinion that we're this multi-threaded massive engine, so we're going to kind of cut some corners. So somebody comes along and goes, oh, I just hooked into your game. I'm going to read this list because everything should be there. Not necessarily the case. Or Bethesda or someone released something from memory and didn't release it from the list, or had time to update the list, or had time to do a garbage collection on it before something else tried to reference it. So the reference existed, the data exists. I don't have a chance. The data's gone, but I don't have a chance to remove the reference because it's in a garbage collection state. But now a list says, "Oh, I just scanned this list and that object is still there." Well, of course it is, because it hasn't, because when they garbage collected it, they haven't released it yet. They haven't cleared the variables. They haven't cleared it from the list, and that is a possibility. Um, so it could be. That's why I always see me using like an arbitration. It could be an arbitrating issue between, is the data there? Is it really there? Or do I just see it? Do I just see its reference in a list and I'm going to assume it's there, grab it, and go? Okay, so that being said, you can see these were all fast travels. This is where I rebuilt the patch. And sometimes if I don't rebuild the patch, I can actually, like a lot of times when I update my game, or if I have some kind of like really, and I think another thing has to do with the data. If I have like a bad, like if something is looking for something that's not there, it can do really weird stuff because the game engine tried to be quote quote as efficient as possible. So it didn't want to have a bunch of checking in there, which makes the game data massive and in time critical code like your core, your engine core. Um, it's just not practical. So you have to make an assumption that at some point the data, if it's in a list, if I have a reference, it should be there. And then if it's not, of course, it's going to crash because it has really bad data pointers or references. So if you take a look at this, again, fast travel to Sunshine Tidings, but I could get the 20 thing, and I believe that's 120. It could be 20, but I believe that's 120. Probably just wrote it wrong. Let's see. See, now this is another example of getting near Ten Pines Bluff. So what I did was, I'm like, I got near I didn't actually go to Ten Pines Bluff. I was actually running up the railroad track or looking up the hill where I think there was a little sign that just points up this way, which is where Ten Pines Bluff is. It crashed. And so I didn't actually get to the settlement, but I believe it was doing a cell load. So I was close enough to where there's like the player's in the center and there's certain cells around the player, and it renders objects in that cell, and that goes for permanent, like persistent references and things like that. All those are kind of part of what the game engine does, like how many actors it's going to look at even when you're not in that area. You come back that your NPCs are dead, but you didn't actually walk in on a gunfight because the game's already calculated it out. All right, so and it kind of supposed to give the illusion of real time. All right, so the world is happening in real time even when you're not in the area. And so now here I got a crash importing a settlement with transfer settlements. Now that's not an inherent problem with transfer settlements. That just means I imported it. I probably reloaded something real quick. The meshes and everything hadn't had time to stabilize, and down she went. But if you look, you can actually see it's a 20. So this is what's cluing me into something that it's got to be with pre-combined meshes or something. All right, so here is back to, let's see what this is. Yeah, this one I'm not entirely sure, and I don't think I have it in the database because this is all like a work in progress. I do. Okay. So isn't allowed. It might have been a 5. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. So yeah, it is a 5. So that's again, probably it's a bad reference or bad pointer. All right. So you notice that we don't have a ton of loose file streams and all that kind of stuff, but we are getting the previs stuff. And I thought, okay, let's focus on previs and see if we can get a previs repair pack in there. I'm sure I think I already had it in there. He's updated his mod. So he's updated things. He's updated his previs repair pack data because sometimes there will be a problem. He'll go, and he's pretty good about that. The mod author is pretty consistent with all that kind of stuff, and that's kudos to him because that takes a lot of work. And it's hard to be out in the front where, something crashes and it's like, well, is it your previs data? It could be. Let me take a look and see. Okay, I tried regenning it. Does it work? Okay, maybe we solved the problem. And that's a pretty open way to approach it. And that's a good way to approach it. All right, so I did add, if you take a look here, I did add a lot of things. I did update. This is actually, the Cambridge facility is like a little dungeon. It's got a really neat feel to it, neat vibe. And it's mostly ghouls, which is really kind of cool. And it seems pretty well laid out. It's pretty linear, and that's okay. But wood supports, settlements, these are wooden supports that just add stuff to workshop. So you got a house built up in the air. Well, now it can be built on stilts, things like that. Weapon racks is the same thing. Prefabs, more prefabs is really cool because there's different shacks you can put up. Sandbags, these are all things I added, which would give me workshop objects. Um, and crossbow, that's being injected now just fine. But you could see where I had a couple crashes, combat drones. So I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and just start a new game because I added some mods. And let me just, and I added take and equip. So I did add some mods I wasn't sure about. Some of them I've never used before. So let's just, for the safety factor of it, let's just go ahead and start a new game, which is what I did. So let's go back up to our current game, and we can get the current game we're playing. We're gonna do it like this. And you can see so far I've had one crash, and it was a virtual machine crash. So the VM got out of sync. And if you look, I most definitely have been adding mods before the crash. So this Wasteland Gardening, I think, added planters, better locational damage. I went ahead and reactivated all of that. Of course, I've just now modified it. I just now put the code in. I was at work and I was talking to another coworker about how I would approach something. So I just now put the code in to be able, which you can see here, where it'll actually tell you, I can detect whether you added or removed mods or changed locations, things like that. Nothing major, just some kind of simple comparison stuff. But I can capture it, throw it in a manifest, stick a timestamp on it, and you can actually take a look and see what it could be. So just to give more transparency as to what I might be doing or have done to maybe make crashes more not consistent, but cause more or less crashes. But this is a virtual machine, so this tells me that the VM got out of sync. Now let me tell you what happened during this crash, and I know this is a really long video, but it does encompass a lot of things, and some of it I've needed to say for a while, or it's needed to have been said for a very long time. But anyways, all that put aside, so what happened here was I was coming. Okay, so I'm in Diamond City. I'm with Nick, and we're getting ready to do reunions. So I'm out following Dogmeat. Dogmeat's actually, you let them smell the Sunlight Serenade or whatever the heck, City Sunlight. Well, I forget the name of the cigar, but he's checking out the cigar, and we go to the first location. He takes me to this little pond that's just outside of where Diamond City is, and he goes to like smell the cigar, but then at the very same time, I have MAME and other things running, which that my character has a concussion. So I got hit in the head with a bullet, and I do have concussion effects. So the script decides it's going to change the way the environment looks. It's gonna shake the screen a little bit. It's gonna drop all my action points. It has this whole effect that is executed through a script. It's probably like an active effect put on the player, but then it's actually executed through a script. Well, that happened at the very same time. It was the concussion effect. Happened when the dog was sniffing the cigar. So at that point, he didn't move. And I would, try. I dropped the cigar, picked it back up. It didn't make any difference. I couldn't trigger that script. So that script, that somehow those events got broken. The script got broken. So I reloaded. I didn't exit out of the game and then start the game back up. I reloaded my game save, and then he took off running. So then, okay, so I picked the cigar up again. He took off running. We're good. Or I don't remember if I picked it up or not. But anyways, he took off running. So now I can follow him. So I don't have to do any kind of console commands to set stage, all that kind of stuff. So he takes off running down the railroad tracks. I'm following that. Everything's good. So we go past the mole rats. I got like an algui back there. We took care of that. So then we get to where we're going to go down the steps where that little mine is planted on a sleeping bag. And there's a boom bug in there, which comes from the mutant menagerie. So I killed that. And then when I went over there to kind of loot it, that is when this crash happened. It crashed. And normally that would be like a behavior graph or something like that. So we'll take a look at it. And let's see, buff out info. Let's go take a look here. Okay, you can see a lot of stuff in here. Not only is there virtual machine, you got behavior graph, you have all of these things. Now, the problem is which one come first? So the virtual machine come first and then the behavior graph. So this is about in the middle. So I'm guessing somewhere along the line, the Papyrus desynced, and then that is what caused this entire mess. It was an entire cascade effect. So that was the anomaly, the Dogmeat concussion effect happening at the same time when the quest was being updated. So I think it happens at certain times. So if the game engine is trying to update a quest and the script extender or whatever it is does something at a certain time, it interrupts that process. Therefore, the script cannot continue. Now, I'm going to throw this in about the XDI and XDI patch. A lot of people have a problem when you walk into something, you instantly get thrown up with a menu that you can't select the option. I believe the problem with that is, now I haven't looked at the code, this is just an initial guess. The author decided that he's not going to throw up a menu that you can access. Or let me rephrase that. He's not going to throw up the menu and give you keyboard or mouse access to it unless you are within a specific range. So, that being said, if you notice when somebody's talking to you and you have XDI, you can step away from them, look at them, and you don't see the XDI menu until you get close enough to them. Then it will actually bring up the menu, and that would make sense. So the problem is the cell loads and you're right on top of them. The game put them on top of them. So that is a arbitration or desync issue between where it's firing off XDI, but the dude's right in front of you. So I'm assuming what is happening is you go into loads a cell, you're too far away, so it doesn't give you keyboard control, but then all of a sudden, because it fires off the plugin, doesn't give you, the F4SC plugin, it doesn't give you keyboard control, but then all of a sudden you look and you're standing right in front of them, but you can see the menu. And the only way to get around that for me was to try to get away from that NPC, go to another NPC, talk to them, allow XDI to reset that encounter, not the encounter, but the actual menu, then go back to that person, and now I can move through the menu, the XDI menu. And I believe, it doesn't happen, let's say, with extended dialogue or the full dialogue interface, because it does that a little bit differently. But XDI does it more, I think, with a DLL. So that, I think, is the problem. So we're back to, again, a hooked arbitration issue. So you can see where this is my current game. I have added a lot of things. I decided to add the better locational damage patches just to see if they work. The problem is DK and Super Mutant Redux are not from the current version. It was from a light version. That is what I put in this game. So I took those out at a later time because I wasn't sure if that was going to be the problem. It's probably what you see here in the plugin text, maybe. And I have to go up and take a look at all this but we won't do all that. So you can see planner updates, colored icons was an update. That shouldn't be a big problem. You have base object swapper. So there's some things I put in here that is new. Some of them are updates. Stomp is new. I put that into Stomp bugs. Sprint reload, that's new. Aquariums is new. That I think is supposed to be part of an overlay pack to, I think it was like a thermal vision overlay or something. Although I do not have the overlay enabled up here. It is here, but it is not actually installed. Let's see if this works. All right, so if I go in here and take a look and we check the install out, yeah, see, it is not installed. So, but it wouldn't matter even if it was installed because it's not active in the load order, so it's not really going to matter anyways. So you can see where I still have the same habits where I add and remove mods during a game playthrough. But I don't, so far, I'm sitting at about 36 gaming sessions. And you can see where I've got 4 hours, 5 hours, 7 hours. That's total time before crash. But here I played 5 hours. Then the virtual machine desynced, which again I believe is because of when certain conditions exist, the game engine is trying to do its multitasking thing, but one part of the multitask is not considering the other. You have an arbitration issue. And anyone who's done multi-threaded programming is going to know exactly what that is. It is a pain in the butt. Here it was 6 hours. I played here 6 hours without. I mean, you could see a gaming session, really almost 7 hours with no problems. So this could have been caused by adding and removing mods, because you can clearly see that I've done that. Or it could be an arbitration issue, like I say. But I'm going to keep playing this game save, and then if I add too many mods just to be safe, I'll probably start a new game. It's no big deal. But you can see where the stability has improved, and a couple of things I can say that I did. You can clearly see that I've added and removed mods. Okay, but we still have, and given in spite of that fact, we still have improvements. And yes, they are selective. It is select. I'm just not throwing things in there at random. But two things that I do notice that I've done. Well, three things. One is I absolutely have a previs repair pack, so I don't have previs issues like I've seen before. The second thing I've noticed is I've changed some of my configuration options so that it's not updating lists, hopefully when cells are being loaded. And the third thing that I did is I installed versions of mods where other mod authors have corrected other mod authors' possible bugs or problems, such as Super Mutant Redux and Decay, because in those two mods, they have removed a lot of the extra garbage and extra weight. So let me go ahead and cut this video short, because it's already probably too long, and if I had to listen to myself, I probably would already be asleep by now. So let me get started with that. I got some more coding work I got to do, and then I'll pop back in later to see if I can maybe have a little more ideas or insight as to what might be causing some of the problems. I hope that helps, and good luck with what you're doing.